Eto, sačekaj. Nemoj da ideš. Ja tu da. I sad šeo. Ne, tu su. Evo, sad oni vide i evo nas i to je to. E sad sačekaj. Znači sad možemo početi snimanje. Gledaj vreme. Sad morate klikati rekord još jednom.
This meeting is being transcribed and summarized.
Što mi je lepo odliče.
To je socijalizacija prikuca da...
Okay, good evening. We will start. Before we start, for students online and our students here in the classroom, just to mention and to welcome somehow my friend and colleague, Professor Tanasije Marinković. You will have an opportunity, I think the great one, to listen to his lectures on the forthcoming other courses during the second semester. But I feel very happy that today we will together speak about the feminist reconsideration of political concepts. Tanasije, our agreement is I will start and after the break, I will speak a little bit additionally. Professor Tanasije will interrupt me whenever he wants to add something, either to enrich or to correct me or to put into question some of my interpretations. And then he will speak more in detail on the gender perspective within constitutionalism, or constitutionalism reconsidered from the point of gender substantive equality. So constitution and gender. I will mention a little bit, but I left all of that to him. And after us, you will have one more lecture of Professor Bojan Spajić on the 17th, and then we will finish with this course. I hope that you liked it. I think that how Professor Tanasije likes to say that the holistic approach has been accomplished during our work. And today I will, as a matter of fact, repeat, not with going into details some concepts, but I will put them into the whole, like as gender justice, substantive gender equality, as the starting points for reconsidering the political concept of justice, of equality, etc., etc. In this introductory note, just to say a few things. So feminist focus on overcoming multiple gender-based discrimination imposes the change of the meaning of the traditional political concepts. I mentioned here just some of them: power, justice, rights, authority, democracy, legitimacy, obligation, freedom, and introducing the new concepts as the political ones. So adding some new relevant concepts, as the care as the political concept, community, family, privacy, including the body, sexuality, interpersonal relations in this private context, and interpersonal relations within considering the community as the political concept. As a matter of fact, reconsidering of the old, so to say, political concepts and adding the new ones means the change of those old, adding or changing their meaning. But all of that together means the change of a meaning of the political. And I will try to explain that in this introductory moment, just to say, to make it more inclusive, equitable, based on empathy, solidarity, and with aiming towards care democracy. There is the notion of the care democracy, or equitable care, substantive equality, and towards overcoming multiple oppression. Now I can mention that I was thinking on the way to the classroom. So usually in the feminist legacy, we hear about the ethics of care. However, what we have been exploring today means some kind of the politics of care, or understanding of the political as based on care. And I will try to explain that a little bit more. And just to add that women's historical experience of caretaking and caregiving points to and discovers the importance of the mutual care as something that stems from the character of human relationships, that enables survival, that means a self-assumed obligation to care about others. So I combined here two things. Usual talk about care within the feminist frame repeats the stereotype of private public and the stereotype of women within the patriarchal legacy as those primarily devoted to the care for others. But here, the concept of care as the political concept gains much deeper and much more essential meaning, which I indicated already now, but I will speak a little bit more about. So care as something essentially in a crucial way related to the human species survival, maintaining the human life in general. So this concept of care has much wider meaning than the stereotypical one which I mentioned. So the feminist legacy opens horizons for reconsidering political concepts and the political as such. The politics, but the political, so Rawls used that, and David Rasmussen, not the politics, but emerging of the political as the sphere. So, but that's as politics as such. So the care is not just a private feminine activity, but a fundamental human practice for maintaining life. Care is a universal need, essential for human existence. So obviously not just a nurturing activity and what we mentioned as stereotypical understanding. Care should be the central value in contrast to traditional politics that centers on economics and individual rights. Now we go a step forward. So care, changing the meaning, enriching the meaning of care, but also the focus of the political. Caring for others and the world, so also environmental, animals, etc., etc. So care for others and the world is prior to mere production. Care challenges market economic focus. Care is linked to equality and justice, evidently, how we articulate it. Care requires collective democratic responsibility. Traditional politics ignored care and did so. So here I quote somebody, Toronto, but I will add to that. So traditional politics ignored care and did so harm to women and marginalized groups. I would add not only to women and marginalized groups, but there is a harm for understanding the political sphere, making it more less inclusive, less related towards conscience, well-being, etc., etc. And we will explain later a little bit more about that traditional understanding of political as making compromise within conflicts and conflict resolution, etc., etc. So care leads to redefining citizenship as managing collective care responsibilities, and leads towards the model of care democracy. We will speak a little bit more about, but now this is within an introductory part. Care democracy focused on a just allocation of care. Just allocation of care. That is also important because there are deep-seated inequalities in care based on gender, race, and class, which dictate who performs care. So it's so complex. Evidently, care, we leave aside care as just individual, so it is not. It is a societal project that requires a systemic change within institutions, schools, families, markets, in order to support equitable care, and further on in order to arrange differently from the traditional politics, the well-being of the peoples. So opening horizons, and now I will very shortly go through these, what I've been listing, because later we will speak. Well, this is just an introductory part, but have it in mind and go back to these notions later on, because you will understand them very well after I hope so, after everything what we will talk about. So changing the meanings of different concepts. Masculinist concept of self, that is individualist, independent, and transforming it into an interactive relational concept. Masculinist version of freedom and autonomy transformed into differentiation of freedom from and freedom to, or self-realization, substantive equality, pointing to the fact that privacy is to be connected to rights and to recognition of differences, recognition of different private needs. So opening horizons, pointing to the fact that the meaning of private and public depends on sex, class, race, and sexual orientation, intersectional understanding of this interrelation. As such, and in attempts to overcome the dichotomy, the traditional political dichotomy, private and public. Feminist approach leads to rethinking obligation, democracy, power, authority, etc. Power and authority, reshaped on the basis of women's historical experiences of care, connection, and relationship that imply mutuality, cooperation, nurture, and support. Reconstructing masculinist understanding of democracy linked to domination, force, coercion, with putting much bigger accent on persuasion that is linked to care and connection, plus emotion, communication, and relationship. Rights. Intersectionality approach to multiple gender-based discrimination enables combining individualist and group individualist, the traditional mostly understanding, and group-based approach to rights, individualist liberal formulation of rights, as some of the authors, I do not want to mention them, but just to repeat, we spoke about, is racist and sexist, and is used against women of color, but also against most of white deprivileged women. So the concept of rights, and Tanasia will work on that much more than I'm able, because he's very much in the topic. But for the beginning, this is something. So in this opening of horizons, it's very important that this new emerging understanding of the political necessarily makes it, is based on interdependence of the concepts. Their concepts are mutually connected. Privacy is key to freedom. Freedom is key to obligation. Care is valid for authority. Compassionate authority is essential to care. Care and equality are vital to democracy. Democracy is central to community. Justice is central to community. Power is related to community. Community of others, one of the terms, is relevant for autonomy and privacy. So all these concepts are interconnected. And within this opening of horizons, just to mention, overcoming artificial dichotomy private-public leads also to overcoming dichotomies freedom, obligation, authority versus equality, rights versus duties, justice and power versus power. So political power and democracy, now we go more into details with some concepts. So dominant understanding of political power as domination, conflict, dispute resolution, handling and balancing private interests. Due to, for example, Jane Mansbridge, the dominant understanding of power from the 17th century was within adversary democracy. And then, so politics involves only conflicting interests. The only method for settling disputes is legitimate power, and power means domination. And politics is, within this framework, politics is competition where majority rule prevails through structured conflict, voting, debate, opposition, rather than inherent unity or shared goals. Politics as self-interested behavior channeled through collective action, voting, lobbying. Egoism is the main motivation of political acting. Manipulation is a part of the game, of this context. However, contemporary democracies have brought about the change by using a mixture. That's very simplified. That should be better articulated. But also, besides this conflict resolution or adversary democracy aspect, also the deliberative democracy development. So, mixture of coercive power, threat of sanctions and force, and persuasion, which is different from manipulation, which means presenting reasons, communicating on common goals, and the mixture of knowledge and emotion. So deliberative democratic approach also adds this passionate approach and empathy approach. Persuasion always has that part in itself. Not only reasoning, but adding this devotion and emotion. So Habermas' conception of deliberative democracy is there, and I will mention a little bit later constitutional patriotism as the part of this talk. So a little bit more about political power and democracy reconsideration. So second wave feminists suggested a new definition of political power as energy, strength, and effective interaction rather than domination. So the political power due to this wave of feminism has not been only the power of coercion. Masculinist theory of power as domination has been contrasted with the feminist understanding of power as empowerment. So we add new concepts which add to this elaboration. Accent is on connection and relationship over individualism and rights, relying on collaboration and persuasion and creating power with others, instead of imposing it through sanctions or force. So persuasion and empowerment. Insights related to the specific female culture of care and giving are used for reconstructing democratic ideals to give persuasion greater primacy in democratic theory and practice. This is not a bad argument, so I will go further on a bit with that. So the point is that the reconstruction of a theory of democratic persuasion through the female experiences of connection and care is based on women's historical position of powerlessness. Women of all classes and races had to develop better persuasion capacities while being devoid of most economic, social, and political power resources. So that as the reason and source of more developed persuasion within the care context related to women's patriarchal heredity and experiences. However, we built upon that much more and develop these concepts of care, democracy, persuasion, and, as I said, constitutional patriotism, which I will mention a little bit more. So the third wave feminists deconstruct the gender-coded dichotomy reason and motion. So political, mostly related to reasoning, and so manipulation also is primarily based on reason, with an idea that not only cognitive, right-based, individual-oriented approaches can contribute to reconstructing the concept of democracy, but also affective, relationship-based, and connection-oriented approaches. So the third wave adds to what we mentioned concerning the second wave feminisms. So, and I quote Mansbridge, the issue of ongoing relationships, listening, empathy, and emotional commitment are as yet underdeveloped in democratic theory. They are underdeveloped, but we with this, what I spoke about, we open the horizon, at least the normative horizon, or more than normative, something what also leads to practical implementation. Contrary to a dominant understanding of politics as the arena of conflicting interests, feminisms contribute to emerging different approaches based on empathy, solidarity, mitigation of conflicts. Democratic theory needs accents on connection, deliberative process, and mutual persuasion that aim to produce a common good. Common good is not the best term. Res publica, something what is relevant for the public good, let's say so. So by making deliberations less hierarchical, so the title is also important. So we spoke adversary democracy, then the step forward with developing within the mainstream understanding and implementing of the political, the concept and practice of deliberative democracy, connected also with the civil society, civil disobedience, etc., etc., etc. But what feminism or feminisms do add is better off within the deliberative democracy understanding of the political by making the deliberations less hierarchical and more interactive and listening oriented, so that feminists could significantly contribute to the theory and practice of democratic deliberation, making it more inclusive and better quality. It would allow for the recognition of the needs and interests of disadvantaged social groups and open a more inclusive public space for their political participation. It leads to the reconstruction of democratic power and deliberation based on the insights on connection and empowerment. So, feminist theory to make as a whole this argumentation. Feminist theory invites democratic theory to take into consideration that mutually crossed systems of private and public power support dominance, so that they have to be overcome in order that this dominance approach be overcome. That our relations in the allegedly private domain of the family result in women's subordination, but are equally crucial for power relations of domination in the public sphere. That the battle against domination cannot be restricted to government institutions, but must also include the family and private sphere as well as individuals. When we spoke about those gender theories of justice, we spoke much more about that. So, mainstream democratic theory and practice must adopt a much more inclusive approach to political participation and citizenship, meaning of the political subject. It must articulate normatively and in practice an inclusive conception of human dignity based not only on the abstract idea of equal concern and universal equality. Now we come back to the whole talk about formal equality versus substantive gender equality and four-dimensional conception of substantive gender equality. So based not only on the abstract idea of equal concern and universal equality, but also on acknowledging different multiple gender and transgender identities, as well as the common needs and interests of all disadvantaged groups. The goal of, I'm quoting again, I think Mansbridge, the goal of democratic order must be to become fully inclusive and participatory within the framework of constitutionally guaranteed universal human rights and the rights of minorities. So here I can stop. Maybe you want to add something, because this as a whole is...
I think it's very good. Maybe just 2 points that I could reflect upon to contribute and to maybe shed a light on what President Dragica is saying in different words. First of all, I'm very happy that I have opportunity to teach with you. I've learned a lot from President Dragica, and this is the first time we teach together. So it's something exceptional. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you also for organizing us, all of us, the faculty to have this lodge, to have this master's program.
But just to add to this, so Professor Tanasie is the most competent, or among the most competent professors here, and not only here at our faculty, who has been dealing with these concepts of constitutionalism, political, legal and political interrelation. So, and through this common work, I invite him, and he invites me to understand better the traditional understanding and the feminist reconsideration. So from the best, how to say, from the best in his case and good in my case, we make, how to say, the synergy for the better of the theoretical achievements.
Yeah, and
so that's the point.
It's called co-teaching, which is actually the best way of teaching for the students. It's also good to have this interaction between the professors. So that's really not good for them. I think the best place to learn methodology as well. But just to go to the substance, because the time is limited, the presentation is very big. What I want to say is that I entirely concur with what you have said, and I think that the notion of the political and of politics has evolved thanks to the feminist approach to it. So when I also teach the concepts of political, I say that politics is an activity which is directed towards establishing of policies which are of mandatory character, which are obligatory, within pluralistic communities, by exactly what President Dragica was saying, by means of persuasion and compromise. This is very important. This is my understanding of politics, actually. And this has come as a result of the influence of the feminist theory. Mm-hmm. Because the previous understanding of politics was, as you would maybe remember from your previous education, for example, Clausewitz's understanding that politics is the continuation of war by other means, and vice versa. that war is the continuation of politics by other means.
Conflict resolution,
Yes.
majoritarian decision making.
Yes, imposing dominance. What Professor Dragica was saying.
Nailed definition.
Sorry.
Really nailed it.
Yeah, really nailed definition, but this is a definition which is abandoned nowadays. It is absolutely abandoned because now we have, for example, among different typologies of democracies, the understanding of the majority democracy and co-associative understanding of democracy. And that majority democracy is the understanding according to which there is a clear-cut majority, and that majority is achieved through elections, and usually those elections are based within the single electoral constituencies. And I'm not going to go into neither here now nor within this course into these issues of. Are you lawyers, by the way? Okay, no. What is your background? Okay, you're among the friends within the family. So the majority democracy types of democracies, they come already from the electoral systems which are biased, which favor certain dominant parties. And very often those dominant parties, even though they don't have the majority, the absolute majority in the population, through the biases of the electoral system, they have absolute majority of seats in the parliament. So the whole system becomes biased, and it excludes the vision, the idea of the existence of the other. And the feminist political theory has actually brought, by fighting for the position of women, by recognizing the subjectivity of women, it has also indirectly brought, and I mean, of course, the feminist political theory comes from the Marxist political theory, which, for one part, it comes from the understanding that equality and the justice, the key concept of the political philosophy, cannot be achieved without reference to the reality. That idea of equality, which doesn't correspond with state of the affairs in reality, is imperfect equality. So this is why we distinguish formal equality and substantive equality, which insists or tries to achieve equality in practice. And so thereby the feminist theory, fighting of course for the rights of women with the good cause, has also contributed to understanding as well that there are other minorities within the society, and that we will of course speak about it, that it is not by accident that women are put in this disadvantaged position, but it is also very much related to their other identities that we will talk about in the context of intersectionality. What I want to say is that this is, and I'm not going to take any more of the time, is that this understanding of the politics is nowadays, let's say, dominant in the civilized societies. Even there where it is not in the countries, in the states where there is no consociative democracy, which means democracy which recognizes the existence of different communities. So women with their identity, ethnic communities, religious communities, sexual minority communities, etc., racial communities, which all have to be recognized. Another concept which is relevant for the feminist legal theory, which is the concept of recognition, and we will talk about that as well. That they have to be recognized. So there is no politics if there is no pluralism. Like if there is no competition between different identities, between different groups. There is only one group deciding over everything. That is not politics, actually. And also politics presupposes what Professor Dragica said is the negotiation. So this is something which is also in some societies considered as you rightly pointed out, not manipulation, because in some societies it is considered that compromise is actually something very bad, and that compromise, that the person who makes compromises is the person who doesn't stick to his principle. Whereas actually compromises presupposes that I, with my principles, and you with your principles, we recognize each other, and that we try to reach a common ground, because otherwise living in a community is not possible. And this is, again, something that feminist political theory, the ethics of care, which is exactly not the care in the banal sense, but also care in a wider sense of exactly recognizing the other, caring about the other, respecting the other. And I'm not going to.
And now, because we have a great opportunity to check with you these ideas which go beyond this understanding of care, which is most common, deep, which is a complex one, but this understanding, and I came to this step forward through analyzing some relevant authors. So to check together this, so what are the points of this making step beyond and deeper in relation to deliberative democracy towards something called as care democracy. Somebody used that care democracy, at least as a metaphor. So what's the point? A few points. I mentioned them, but now I will mention them again in order that you discuss them, to reflect on them. So care, far from, we know all of us that it is not just a private or feminine activity, but is fundamental human practice for maintaining life. One axiomatic idea. Care is a universal need, essential for human existence. To stop there is something else. But care, the third, so universal need, fundamental human practice. So without care, humanity could have not survived. So care is a universal need, essential for human existence. Care now, this care should be the central value in contrast to traditional politics that centers on economics and individual rights. Care challenges market economic focus, but individual rights also. Yeah. In the sense that what I mentioned, in individualist focus in understanding human rights leaves aside too much and comes at the end of the day to something what can be even racist or sexist. We know that because they are in a male manner often understood, but also racist in relation to
exclusionary towards everyone who is different.
So, and by the way, the book which you will be the editor of will deal. So, please comment this. So, should be the central value in contrast to traditional politics and centers that centers on economics and individual rights, and universal need and fundamental human practice, and leads to redefining citizenship as managing collective care responsibility. We have responsibilities one to each other. And then, intersectional understanding of the lack of equitable care, because care is unequally shared, unequal capacities for care come depending on race, class, age, etc., etc.
I think what you said previously is that this is a sort of, I will use the term, I think use the term of program, or I think it's a political agenda that you have to embrace. I mean, if you want to consider yourself as a feminist or protecting, furthering.
This is not anymore talk primarily or only on feminist approach.
It's not,
This is the reconceptualization of the political as such.
I agree, absolutely. It's a reconceptualization of the political as such, but it is, what I want to say is that there is a kind of fallacy in thinking, and actually there is an explanation to that as well, that by providing more seats for women in the parliaments, we would by definition have this kind of political agenda. The idea is to, by providing for more seats for women, to try to introduce this kind of thinking, which is more inclusive, which is more receptive to the others, which is more empathetic. But it doesn't mean that it is going to be for sure there, unless there is this kind of also something which is typical for the notion of politics, which I didn't mention before negotiations. There is a public advocacy. You have each of us has its or her or his own political positions. So, and we advance them and we compete. So the pluralistic societies presuppose competition. But what you want to say, Dragica, is that this competition, shouldn't go to the expense of the respect of the other. And in that sense,
and apart from sharing the well-being means,
well, I will say,
that's the point.
I will speak about the welfare social aspect of constitutionalism, revisited from the gender perspective. And one of them is the welfare state. So you can't actually imagine the gender balanced or gender influenced constitutionalism without taking into account this re-challenging of the public-private divide, and by introducing welfare state, because without that kind of support,
and within an intersectional understanding of the welfare state,
yes,
because redistribution is not enough without all other
participating and
dimensions of participation and struggle against gender-based violence and recognition of differences, all what is encompassed within the four-dimensional approach of Friedman.
And interiorization as values.
Yes.
And only then this will not be considered sharing, will not be considered as taking away from you, but actually that you are in a way developing yourself by sharing with the others.
Good. Okay. So I will be a little bit faster in order that but we are okay. I think it's okay. Okay. So concept of justice and gender justice we spoke enough about, and I will skip it because definitely political theories or political philosophy of justice without this reconsideration has been left in some limited male-framed context. So feminist critique of the mainstream theories of justice and elaboration of theories of gender justice have been something what means and really added value. Then again, concept of equality, substantive gender equality. You will have the PowerPoint, so you can go through this. I made here the summing up of what initiated the first wave of feminism, formal legal equality establishing, then the second wave putting into question the limits of formal legal equality, and then the third wave, which overcomes again the limits of the binary approach to gender and the concept of women, etc., etc. And then intersectionally understood substantive gender equality. Just to mention that, needs taking seriously differences among women and non-binary people based not only on gender and sexual orientation, but also based on class, race, age, disability, ethnic, religious, cultural, educational affiliations. So we spoke a lot about that and widening the scope of political. Now I'm giving a little bit summing up ideas, and then I will go into some particular concepts. So feminism poses a radical challenge to the traditional understanding of politics while instigating its redefinition to include family, body, and sexuality, interpersonal relations, privacy and care, all of which are considered non-political concerns or concepts by mainstream theory. I quote Hirschman, In challenging, changing, and broadening our notions of the political, feminist politicization of concepts such as community, family, privacy, and care adds to the existing stock of available political terms, thus enriching the political vocabulary. By the way, I will make the PDF of that book. I gave it to Professor Tanasi, and I don't have, but I will make it, and I will. That really is a good. It really is a good book. Incorporating non-political concepts, allegedly non-political concepts, into the notion of politics changes the meaning of both the old official political terms and new political terms, as well as of the conceptual realm of the political, widening the space and meaning of the politics towards including empathy, care, solidarity, connection, which enter the space of the political. So widening goes with their help. So interplay of old and new political concepts. I mentioned here that the feminist revision of old political conceptions in their interaction with new ones will be demonstrated through an interplay of the notions of care, community, and privacy as the new political concepts with the old political concepts of democracy and power. I remind myself in this, but so community as meaning as developing mutual care. So community used to be considered in the mainstream, the backdrop for politics, but not politics as such. But feminists emphasize the importance of the community as a process of developing mutual, so community is the sociological, let's say so simply, concept. But feminists emphasize the importance of the community as a process of developing mutual relations, negotiating about the common good, being in common, fostering a sense of belonging, and taking care in political terms. Feminists refuse the identitarian definition of the community. You know what it means. So collectivity which does not open space for individuals within the, for example, ethnic groups to express their opinion or to decide upon their individual acting. So collectivist approach means collectivist oppression of individual needs and choices, especially with regard to the negative impacts of different forms of patriarchal subordination of women within different cultural, ethnic, and religious identities we know about. The political concept of community helps us to honor the desire for mutual belonging and recognition without reifying and or domesticating it. I quoted here Fallon from this excellent book of edited by Hirschman and Di Stefano. So the concept of community helps us to honor the desire for mutual belonging and recognition without reifying or domesticating it, without putting that sense of belonging into the patriarchal framework. Let's say it's simply. So community, the concept of community as a sense of belonging, which emphasizes the importance of individual choice to join a community rather than individuals being forced to obey collectivist codes, resonates with Habermas' concept of political identity based on constitutional patriotism. So free choice, individual space that exists for individuals within the community to express themselves, to do anything what means self-realization, autonomy, not only imposition, obligation, obedience, to accept and to implement rules and codes which the collectivity, ethnocultural group, let's say, so imposes. In a way, the feminist reinterpretation of community as a political concept converges with the concept of democracy conceived as constitutional democracy, deliberative democracy, constitutional patriotism. So you will speak about that more. And now I spoke a few times about privacy and private-public dichotomy, but let me, maybe also because of Tanasia, shortly and fastly to go through this. Always again, it also is interesting to me, and I think it's very relevant that we really take that always again into consideration. So to start with, that private is political was the slogan of the radical feminists in 1970s. However, considering privacy and reconsidering the dichotomy between private and public has become a general feminist issue. The radical feminist proposal that personal is political cannot be ignored anymore by any feminist stream, liberal, Marxist, in different ways, but just to have that in my mind. So, something important. Feminists do not negate or neglect the issue of privacy as such, but uncover the patriarchal background of the so-called private sphere of patriarchal family and subordinated female roles within that type of the family. So privacy and private still have the relevance, but out of this patriarchal framework. And private is political, the slogan or the meaning, the essence of this slogan has a variety of meanings. Right to abortion is an individual human right. So issues of reproductive rights, now we will just sum up some ideas which some of them we have already mentioned. Also gender-based violence, privacy, autonomy, right to be left alone, all of this. So right to abortion is an individual human right. Reproductive rights protection needs welfare state that respects the autonomy, but considers intersectional context of violating the reproductive rights. Right to abortion has to be put into this context of reproductive rights, and reproductive rights protection has to be considered within intersectional context and also that related to the welfare state. Gender-based violence becomes a matter of public law and state protection. Private life and care and obligations are the common responsibility of partners. So here there are different dimensions of private sphere, and within this private-public dichotomy. And for example, a right to abortion within the feminist understanding keeps on being the right to autonomy, privacy, individual right. But gender-based violence has necessarily become the issue of public law and protection against gender-based violence, because these different things which belong to the private-public dichotomy within the patriarchal framework of social roles and social relations start entering different fields, some of the private law and individual rights, and some of the public law and the state responsibility for the protection against gender-based violence, for example. So this interrelation of right to privacy and right to equality and welfare state. So right to privacy and the right to equality are interconnected in a sense that equal access to abortion requires an active and affirmative state intervention, but not the interventionist state, not the state which decides upon, like in extreme right being contexts which have been entering the public space of those states that have been becoming more and more traditionalist or authoritarian. So states are not there to decide upon about whether or not about the right of abortion, but they have to be, yes, it's easier to say so, but to be there in help for its accomplishing right to decide upon whether or not to keep or not the baby. It means a state that allows equal access while respecting the individual right to choice. This has implications for a more inclusive democratic state and intersectional approach, which cares about poor women and women of color, demanding well-ordered health care. So right to abortion as individual right also primarily has to be considered as belonging to reproductive rights, which have to be taken care from intersectional perspective within welfare states and welfare states that really care about well-ordered health care. In that context, the privatization of state services related to health care the privatization of these services compromises the essence of one's privacy if someone cannot obtain health care for reproductive rights. That's very important to this intersectional approach. The right to use contraception loses effect if one cannot buy a condom or a diaphragm, or if one cannot afford him or herself the protection. And, quote, without a commitment to racial, sexual, and economic equality, privacy rights for women are reduced to a sham. And they remain abstract rights for white heterosexual men. This is in a provocative manner.
I thought so.
Yes, yes. So, privacy and human rights. So, and this is also very important, and Tanasia has to commend this. So the liberal understanding of privacy extends that right to women as individuals, but does not define it as a right to reproductive freedom. The focus must be on reproductive rights as fundamental rights of all women, which must be accessible for women of different classes and races. Instead of focusing on a single right to abortion, disconnected from the need for a job and good health care, reproductive rights expand the issue of abortion to include affordable health care, as well as measures to reduce infant mortality and teenage pregnancy. So this is also this intersectional, as you mentioned, complexity of life state of affairs, of women of different classes, races, ages, etc., having job or not having, and being in the pregnancy as teenager, etc. As such, reproductive rights cut across racial and economic lines and demand welfare state intervention policies in favor of the equality of women of different races and classes. So, just to add to this reconsidering of reproductive rights as individual group rights, as group of rights, and to put into that context also the right to privacy, or as some of the authors said, to be left alone. That really is a very good formulation, because we all can remember, leave me alone. I need the free space, the empty space of other obligations, expectations, etc., just for yours. So the right to be left alone, and as how these authors whom I've been taking into consideration directly put into interconnection with the class, race, social status, and other sources of discrimination. So the right to privacy deeply is dependent on these circumstances. So women's legitimate privacy should be essentially different from the patriarchal privacy associated with female repression. So that's not the private, traditional private sphere. Cooking, caring, that's, etc. You know that very well. It should provide women with opportunities for individual forms of privacy and private choices. Women of all races and classes should have right to privacy and individual freedom to be left alone under conditions of an inclusive democratic order with progressive policies and health care and equal access to reproductive rights regardless of their racial and social economic status. Of course, that this is a very normative statement, but that's the standard. The reality is far, far, far from that, but it has to be had in mind as the criteria, as the red line, as the standard. The family as a private domain is no longer limited to women. Women and men should share family and work obligations in order that women can at all practice the right to be left alone. But then in that context of sharing or fair share, leaving alone both right to privacy of both those who share obligations should also be allowed. And of course, I mentioned this related to gender-based violence. It is most important to make this differentiation that something of what belonged together to the patriarchal private sphere and the dichotomy of private and public, that women control of women's bodies was the matter not of their privacy and free choice, but is controlled by the patriarchal family and the whole hierarchical heteronormative context. And also gender-based violence as the counterpole of the same story, of the same patriarchal framework, where gender-based violence is a private matter. So that has been overcome, and it had to be overcome. So nowadays, fortunately, we have international law and nation states laws that put protection against gender-based violence into the sphere of public law. And as I said here, domestic violence and sexual harassment are no longer private issues, but a responsibility of the state, in a sense that prevention of, protection from, and sanctioning of the gender-based violence has become a public matter, a matter of the international and domestic law. A women's right to privacy is not possible in circumstances of gender-based violence. We can discuss it, but that is rather obvious. And just shall we make the break? And I have a very short summing up presentation, and then you can go on with more time. I think that we can make break. Is it okay? Because this is intensive. Okay, but you should have reminded me because I concentrated. I'm sorry if I went along, but no, but I didn't. 1 hour and 6 minutes. That's usual. Okay, so is it enough? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and then we will finish earlier. Okay. Just a second. Dushanka.
10 minutes is great. Thank you.
Thank you. So, but please, I forgot you. Please, I forgot to ask you for your comments. This online work is really, because I was concentrated to Professor Tanasian. So do you have any comments, critical remarks?
Professor Ka, everything understandable, that Raju ma'am.
What?
Everything understandable, the Raju ma'am.
Just a second, please. Just a second.
Professor ka,
Excuse me, Saiful. What did you say?
Professor ka, the Raju ma'am, everything.
Understand, resume.
Ah, you understand.
Yeah.
But do you have any comments? Because you're, as far as I checked, already done assignments. You really did them very well. Those two done by you really were, how to say, up to the point. I like them. Did you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. I can hear you, Professor ka.
He hears you.
Okay, you hear me, but are you satisfied with my compliments, or you don't have it yet?
Please.
Professor ka, satisfied for first compliment, but for second assignment you don't take any compliment, no comment, only great.
Okay. So we will make a break until 7:20, and then we will go. We will proceed. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
Mute.
naših diplomiranih ekonomista, master poslovnih informatičara i doktora ekonomskih nauka. Ekonomski fakultet Univerziteta u Kragujevcu jedna je od retkih visokoškolskih ustanova najnovije trendove potrebe tržišta rada, a stručnost nastave poznaje na regionalnom i međunarodnom nivou. Studenti završe ekonomiju, resurs i grada
I see.
Little present.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hawala
Wow.
photo.
Wow.
Hawala
Wow,
photo.
Meister. Wow.
Okay, thank you.
No. Addio, butti letto, butti di gioventini, I bozzi, butti nastri. Sai che lo fanno, hai nuovo costruito. Wash. Faccio tu muore, ok. No problem. Faccio da sempre in casa. It's 27 and 24. Yes, 27. Oggi da casa, non ho da thank you. Ok, voilà. Ciao. 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 Grazie, boss. My bedsheet. Pens. Tomorrow.
ওই কাইয়ুম উনি আসছে কেন জানো? টিভিতে আমাকে দেখাইছে আজকে। টিভিতে আমাকে দেখাইছে, উনি টিভি দেখে আমার গিফট নিয়ে আইছে। টিভি এদেশের টিভিতে দেখাইছে আজকে আমারে। আমি যে ইয়া নিচ্ছি টিভিতে দেখাইছে, টিভির স্ক্রিপ্ট পাঠাইছে আমারে। এই দেখে যাও কাইয়ুম, টিভিতে দেখাইছে আমারে আজকে খবরে। হ্যাঁ, ট্রাই দিয়ে গেছে একটা। গুড। আমাকে টিভি দেখাইছে ওইটা সে আমারে পাঠাইছে। এই যে টিভিতে দেখছে সে, দেখে পাঠাইছে আমারে। এই যে পাঠাইছি দেখো। কাইয়ুম তোমার পাঠাইছি দেখো। কাইয়ুম দেখছো? দুইটা দিছি, দুইটা দেখো।
Record.
Share.
পাঠাইছে আমার।
Mora da čekaj da.
Da, sačekaj.
Samo ne vidim, ne vidim.
Evo,
ওরা টিভি দেখতেছে, টিভি
Share.
করতে
čekaj.
Nismo stavili rekord. To ste
Sad ćemo.
pravo.
টিভি দেখতেছে তো ভিডিও করছে, ভিডিও করে
Otvoriš.
Da, moraš.
ইয়ারে পাঠাই দাও, কি নাম নাম?
Vedi on.
ইয়ারে পাঠাতো?
Ja sam bio.
Jelena Dušanka isto.
Šta si to uradio? Nemam pojma.
Pa ništa,
Kako da
klikni na
vratim?
na Microsoft Python.
Bolji si od mene, Das.
Evo da što.
Šta je sad bilo?
Ništa, klikni tu ponovo. I share.
Ne znam šta se desilo. Aha. Što se opet izgubilo? Just a second, excuse me.
Može se otvori ponovno.
Ništa, klikni, ali stop, nije stop.
Ode do njega da mi je
Ništa, onda ide ovdje na stop. Pa, sad imaš. Ovdje dobiš, ne?
Šta znači radi? Da je dobro.
Šta se desilo?
Jedna voda rasličiš na plastiku da mi kažeš pa kaj ga niskom
Dušanka. Dušanka, dođi s ove strane. Ne znam šta se desilo.
Ajmo opet. Share. Ali PowerPoint nešto ne radi.
A ti ga otvoriš ponovo.
ভিডিও করে
Da, klikneš
Evo.
ovdje.
Dobro.
Tu je taj. Pa da,
Vidi, ono i taktilno to radi.
što pravimo?
Da. What about the
To je to,
share? Ok,
to je to.
to.
To je to. Da, i možete samo ovo da smanjite.
Recording je uključen.
Nije to da.
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ওটা সার্বিয়া আমার দেখছে, সব টিভি দেখাইছে এটা নাম সহ বলছে, নাম ডিক্লেয়ার করছে, ইয়া দিছে।
Ti ne sam pipljeno. So, at the beginning, now we start. I apologize for a little delay.
ক্লাস
At the beginning, I mentioned how interconnected have been all the concepts which we have mentioned in the meantime. Some also elaborated more, some less. And now I will quote Hirschman and Di Stefano, how they put that all together. If relationship, connection, and care are of central importance to women's visions, what it means to be a person, then autonomy cannot be radical independence. So autonomy has to be some kind of the relation. Freedom cannot be just the absence of interference from others. So freedom presupposes care, responsibility. Obligation cannot be purely contractual. It has also to be some kind of devotion, something similar or literally speaking related to constitutional patriotism. But obligation so is something more than I signed the contract. I am obliged by the contract. I am obliged by my approach of the devotion to something beyond my individual interests. power cannot be simply domination. It has to be also empowerment, interrelation, responsibility, empowering those powerless. Authority cannot be impersonal and dispassionate. So this is a little bit more complicated. Authority cannot be impersonal and dispassionate. So authority. So I can use some concepts which I took from Eric Fromm and which I like to mention. Maybe even I mentioned to some of you, and that also can help to understanding of this, that authority cannot be impersonal and dispassionate, meaning that when there is maybe this will be useful, but Tanasi, and you can help and say it is not enough useful or something, some additional interpretation is necessary. But differentiation between two kinds of authority: authoritarian and authoritative. I cannot pronounce the best. Authoritative. So authoritative. Thank you. So one is based on hierarchy, obedience, imposition, threat of this or that kind, sanctions or whatever, some kind of violence. And authoritative authority is based on the quality of acting, on the good example, so it also has to encompass some kind of being devoted, being
not being blind,
not being blind, feeling the responsibility, passion in some, how to say, some
interest way.
Yes. Passion in a sense of devotion, being engaged, not passion, literally passion. Passionate, being engaged, responsible, being committed. Thank you. Passionate, being committed, devoted or committed. Equality cannot be based exclusively on sameness, but must recognize particularity. So that's the whole our story. A few times from different perspectives and in different aspects mentioned. Differentiation between formal legal equality, where universal notions are blind for particularities, for differences, for recognition of differences. So equality has to be more than some equal to equals. Unequal to unequally acting towards those who are different, who are unequal. So justice cannot be based on the simple equal allocation of resources, but must refer to specificity of needs. So care approach, welfare approach, four-dimensional understanding of substantive equality and the intersectional understanding of justice, all of that, what we have already talked a lot about, make it clear for you. So it's not just a simple equal allocation of resources, but must refer to specificity of needs. Privacy cannot be opposed. So this allocation of resources, if you remember what we spoke about, how, for example, Sandra Fredman speaks about equal allocation of resources, and going beyond equal allocation of resources is giving opportunities for women or non-binary persons from different races, classes, age, sexual orientation, etc., to accomplish their needs and their identities, their affiliations. etc. So to accomplish their specific needs. Privacy cannot be opposed to politics and publicity. We spoke about that. What should be right to privacy and what should be transcended to the public matter, public care against, for example, gender-based violence. Democracy as a political form cannot be solely adversarial and based on power anymore. We spoke about it has to be deliberative democracy and even more the care based.
I just said,
please.
To me, as is like for the ethics, it's what is good and bad and what is in the aesthetics, what is beautiful, what is ugly. The concept of politics, the enemy and the other.
And the key concept within constitutional democratic theory and theory of deliberative democracy, for example, of Habermas, I more spoke about that and about constitutional patriotism at Master in European Integration. But the point of constitutional patriotism is that others are enemies. All are patriots based on constitutional values, and strangers. So that's how to say that's cooperation and community acting of strangers who are not enemies, who are not considered as others as enemies. Community of strangers, but who have all been devoted to values and defined by constitutional patriotism. So sense of belonging to the community on these quality features, values and principles. Please interrupt me. So privacy cannot be opposed to politics and publicity. Democracy as a political form cannot be solely adversarial and based on power anymore. Community cannot ignore the differences and the individuality of persons giving and receiving care. And indeed, care itself must be seen as political. This understanding of care as essential for the maintaining, for the survival, mutual care, intersectional understanding of care, everything of that is very important. But this also that community cannot ignore the differences and individuality of persons. So community, which is democratic community, which is not collectivist understanding of community. Autonomy, public autonomy and private autonomy coming together, as Habermas said. So community which does not impose collective understanding of anything, but opens space for individual autonomy. So that is that. And I started with authoritative and but we came to commitment and passion. So we explained that. So I do not need anymore to consider that. So change of the meaning of the political. And to sum up, and then Professor Tanasie will go on. Introduction of family relations, care, reproduction, body and sexuality, interpersonal relations and privacy into the realm of politics does change the meaning of politics. Politics in feminist terms does not mean only primarily power relations, domination, conflict resolution, but also means overcoming power hierarchies and oppression based on gender, sex, race, class, age, sexual orientation, and other discriminatory grounds. Political acting is based not only on procedural, majoritarian democratic rules, but also on empathy, solidarity, care, devotion to gender justice, care justice, social justice, commitment, which we mentioned. Consequently, the artificial dichotomies between private and public, freedom and obligation, authority and equality, rights and duties, justice and power, care and interests, appropriating and sharing, that are embedded in the mainstream political thought need to be overcome and can be overcome in this different understanding of the political. So in this, how to say, normative summing up of everything what we have been talking about can be the starting point for the further elaboration. But for now, I think it's enough. And now we mentioned some of what Professor Tanasi will speak about is directly related, constitution and gender perspective in the constitutionalism is directly, but adds value to everything what I have already said.
Very complimentary, very good. So you have to give me the seat.
Really?
No, I can speak without the presentation. It's, I mean, I can also do without. Da, otvikao granice. Okay, let me. Each.
নাসির ভাই, উপরে কি আমার মোবাইলটা আছে? মোবাইলটা আছে বেডের উপরে, ওখানে উপরে। এটা আমার টাই দিয়ে গেছে গিফট। টাই গিফট দেখেন, টিভিতে দেখাইছে বলে আমারে, এটা স্ক্রিনশট টিভি থেকে ছবি তুলে পাঠাইছে আমারে।
Okay, I hope we all can see it. We have Sightful and Alexander online, and I think Xenia, yeah? And we have here Yelena, Una, and Ushanka. And starting from the ethic of care and applying it, I will ask you, because it implies interactiveness. I would like to hear what are your comments, or maybe if you have any questions, if anything that we have discussed throughout this class, both you present here and you online, if you wanted to come back to some of the issues, or if you have any, as I said, questions or comments about. Okay. So anyway, you can interrupt me at any moment. It is presupposed, it is well understood. And I will try to cast some additional light on the questions which were addressed in the first part of the class. Through the lenses of constitutionalism, one of the key concepts of political and legal theory, a sort of also belief or value, or even if you want ideology, which pursues the goal of a well-organized state based on the constitution, also to a certain extent related to the concept of constitutional patriotism. meaning that society is based on the constitution, which is a sort of a social contract. What is interesting is that while we considered constitution to be a sort of social contract, I'm simplifying it right now because it's not a course in constitutionalism or constitutional law. Some feminist authors, such as Carol Payton, have pointed out that actually it's more a sexual contract than social contract, because that contract was based between men, established between men. It didn't include women. And it was not accidentally, it was not just a pure accident that women were excluded from the politics for such a long period of time. So that contract is not so much social, and it is more actually sexual. So we will speak of very briefly about the development of constitutionalism from the gender perspective. So we will explain why and how that constitutionalism was initially homocentric, that it didn't include women, how it developed as a gender-neutral constitutionalism, which also corresponds to certain strands of feminism, like liberal feminism, and how it became gender-balanced constitutionalism with a further development of radical feminism and with the inclusion of intersectionality in the different strands of feminism. All this comes from the expansion of the reach of public law into what was used to be reserved for free market relations and private domains of family and marital relations. So this is something that you have been addressing, and I don't think that there is particularly need to come back to it at the moment. But what is behind these structural changes is exactly that kind of interplay between the public and private, which initially the two domains were initially considered as separate worlds, and justice was from the ancient Greek states considered as something which is related to the public domain, and no one cared whether there was justice or not in the private domain. It was considered as something which was not relevant for conceptualizing of the state, of the good society, of justice, which has been the key concept of political philosophy since Plato to Rawls. So I will just read these things and then I will explain them. The birth of modern constitutionalism was related to the switch from a religious to secular state on one side, and also from a switch from an absolutist to liberal state. Okay, so the modern constitutionalism was born in that kind of context. I will explain a little bit. Again, it was the clear delineation of public and private spheres was typical for it. And also, what is very important to understand is that inequalities were based on differences. The inequalities based on differences are treated as legitimate. Now, this is very important for the transformation. I don't know how much you have. It's very ungrateful because I read your presentations and they're very good. I just don't want to be repetitive in case you have already done some of these things. But this is that switch of recognition of differences, that switch of treating differences as something bad, being different, understanding it as something bad, to actually understanding it as nowadays, within the ethic of care, within the all the developments which followed, as something which should be supported, in as much as it doesn't hurt the other, of course. I mean, there is always respect for the others, but the differences are a value as such, and not something to be ashamed of.
We explored it a lot through the intersectionality.
Yeah.
The recognition of differences is based on different sources of
discrimination is one of the main analytical tools.
That is great, because then when we come to gender perspective in human rights, that course, for example, we will apply these concepts without, going into much elaboration what they mean, such as intersectionality. But we will see through case law how it also developed the concept of intersectionality, and how still, for example, European Court of Human Rights does not recognize it fully. So that it's something that is still being developed, and it is still a concept which is not fully recognized, I would say. Theoretically, yes, to some point, but not implemented, let alone some other national courts. So what is important to understand is that really there was this this injustice of I don't know how to express the level of that kind of injustice. The fact that we always consider that the great revolutions of the late 18th century brought modernity to the world. And this is the entering of constitutionalism into the political scene, also not as a concept, not only as a concept, like a theoretical concept, like a value, as I said, philosophical consideration, political philosophical consideration, but as something which is being applied. And we say that this is a period, this is a moment when people entered into the political state, because it is them who have brought the new constitutions, adopted the new constitutions. However, that entering of people with the people, as the United States Constitution starts, the preamble, left more than half of the humanity outside of that stage. So there is that kind of injustice of gigantic, I don't know, measures or sizes, which showed how people consider differences to be legitimate, and how they even later on, when they recognized, when you read, for example, constitutional authors of the 19th century, they would say, finally, the suffrage became universal in, for example, 1848 in France, without at all considering the fact that it didn't concern women at all. So it became universal because men were entitled to that universal suffrage, meaning that they could enjoy it even though they didn't pay taxes, because previously there were different kind of obstacles to it, and one of the main one for men was paying taxes. Yeah. Well, I'll not go further into these specificities because we won't have time for the rest. Anyway, this switch came at what preceded it was a secularization of the state. So that was a very big step forward. Of course, that understanding that people are the center of the power and not the gods. And that is definitely the process of democratization. It started the first wave of democratization, but as I said, it was it kept women in the position of the second-grade citizens. And also, what was important for that switch toward at least men having that kind of recognition was the transfer from the switch from the absolutist to the liberal state, which again implied the recognition of the individual and individual's importance, in line with the liberal philosophy. But at the same time, which was perfectly in line with the liberal philosophy, was the presence and continuation of that public-private divide. So public and private were divided, and public was reserved for men, and private was reserved for women. Of course, political and civil equality in the second stage, gender-neutral constitutionalism, political and civil equality claims based on the similarities between sexes. So that is the understanding of equality, which was, and Dragica referred to sameness also as a concept which needs to be overcome. I'll come back to this point. Downplaying of differences between the sexes, consecration of female suffrage, and persistence of inequalities in the civil law field. So the movement for the recognition of female suffrage that you also spoke about, 19th century and early 20th century, brought to this stage where constitutionalism did start recognizing women. However, that recognition was primarily reserved to the public sphere. It started being recognized in the public sphere, and civil law remained the place of inequalities. That's very important because it very much interconnects with everything we spoke of previously. That public equalities cannot be achieved without also the equality within the civil society and also within the private domain. So formally, women were made equal with men. This is the liberal feminism period as well, understanding of feminism, which downplays the differences between the sexes. So we don't, we believe that women can do the same and should do the same as the men should do. But at the same time, we in the private sphere we keep them, still in the position of the second-grade citizens. So they're not equal in that sphere, which is important in terms of their economic empowerment, because without that kind of without ability to inherit like their brothers, without full legal recognition, they could not actually be autonomous. And in that sense, the possibility for public engagement, proper public engagement, was not possible. It was more, it wasn't, it couldn't be implemented properly. Sure. Yes, economic independence.
Industrial revolution, for example, was very important. Mass production needed additional
engagement
force, and then gave opportunity for women to enter the public sphere of production and to get a bit of economic.
Also, the First World War and engagement with women in the First World War automatically implied and so women were expected to do as well as men, regardless of their private responsibilities. In the private law, in the private domain, which is also legal regulation of the civil law, their duties, and at the same time, they were formally allowed, given opportunity to compete in the public sphere. But due to these obstacles coming from the private sphere, they couldn't perform in the public sphere as men. And so that was, again, the concept that was typical for the formal, that kind of equality is just formal. It's on the paper. It's not, doesn't take into account the social realities. And then we can speak of the modern constitutionalism as a gender balanced constitutionalism, the claim for equality which accounts for differences between the genders without disadvantaging them, substantial equality prevails or formal equality, correlating equality to differences, public law recognizes non-binary gender, universalism and pluralism in the public law approaches to gender equality. So here we start actually understanding that differences do matter, and we start valuing the differences. And this is what is in the feminist theory considered as a contrast between domination and difference. That we should understand differences as something which should be recognized and not suppressed. Yeah.
I can ask you now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm interested in where is our constitution here? Are we, because we know that right now, because there is no gender in the constitution, but the sex term, we now have a division of the law for gender equality.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I'm wondering, where are we?
Well, it's let's say, first of all, here we speak of a broader term, which is constitutionalism, and not necessarily constitution as such, not just the formal act. And we take into account, in the context of this term, constitutionalism, we take into account all other relevant sources of law. So what is interesting is here that when it comes to correlating equality to difference, to equality to differences, so equality means respect for the differences. Public law recognized non-binary gender, intersex, for example, in the German case. But it wasn't done through the constitution. It was done through the judgment of the German Federal Constitutional Court, for example. So just to say that the concept is broader than just the constitution, and you can, for example, by laws, through legislation, or through the judgments of the Constitutional Court, you may either improve what is in the Constitution and develop certain understanding of constitutionalism, or you may actually destroy what is present in the Constitution. So if you ask me just about the Constitution is not sufficiently gender balanced, the Constitution itself, but at the same time, it's not gender balanced in the sense that it of course recognizes only men and women, and it also recognizes only a marriage for men and women, for example. So that kind of there is that kind of essentialist understanding of the concepts in our constitution, very traditional, that there are a binary understanding that there are men and women, and that so that there is no other there are no other genders. There is no idea that there is a possibility of transition of genders. There is no idea that that sexual minorities, which is different from gender, should also be recognized. Right? I'll come to this point, to these issues as well in the context of human rights, fundamental rights. So they should be also recognize certain rights, such as family rights and right to marriage, for example. But also, to be fair enough, some of these concepts are not also neither developed in the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, because what should be taken into account is the fact that, of course, the convention applies to 46 member states, and so when they interpret the convention, the judges of the European Court of Human Rights, they have to take into account the specificities of all the countries. And they can move forward only when they find that there is sufficient of consensus among the member states, which doesn't justify our country in not recognizing. But I'm just saying that it is also typical for some, or not typical, but it is also the case with some other European countries. And Dragica was actually referring to these kind of holistic societies, which do not sufficiently take into account, there are different meanings of the holism, positive and negative. When the society doesn't, I use it in those terms as well, when the society is holistic, meaning that it looks at the totality and not in the totality is deduced from the majority, from those who make the majority, who are typical, who are normal, and disregards the disregards the minorities, disregards the individuals and their specificities, disregards the differences. So we, in that sense, our constitution is not the best, but we, for example, adopted the law on, let's say, to simplify it, on gender equality, and we, in many aspects, we furthered the issues of related to the gender equality. And we could say that through that law, not fully, but to some extent, we have reached this level of gender, not in all aspects. We have reached the level of gender balanced constitution and constitutionalism. However, as you rightly point to it, and I have done my due in terms of fighting against that wrong injunction by the Constitutional Court, by which a measure by which it suspended the application of that law on gender equality. And I think it is of course it is very wrong, and this just shows how you can do and undo things. The German Federal Constitutional Court in 2017 recognized in a third sex, so to say, or that the sex is non-binary category. But our Constitutional Court did just the opposite. It undid something which was done well by the legislator previously. Mm-hmm. So it can things can get go better or go for better and for worse. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Kind of connected. Thinking broadly about constitution.
Constitutionalism.
Mm-hmm. You said there were different arguments of not just the constitution, but different kinds of sources of meaning also for the legislation, but the decision of the court. Do we take it all into account? Yeah. Because if we could implement, for example, we did the gender equality, but we do, for example, have some progressive, if we did have some progressive norms in the Constitution, but we don't have the
legislation to implement it, yes.
Have that kind of decision by the Constitutional Court. Can we say that the constitutionalism and gender balance?
The whole point of the previous, I think, lecturing in this course, and what we will also continue, is to show that we are interested in effects. What is actually happening in place? So we had actually that, that is also part of the problem. We had that law on gender equality, which also presupposed that certain by legislation was supposed to be adopted related to the use of language, to the gender balanced language, gender sensitive language. And that was not done, So you had a law, previously we had a law and we didn't have the obstructing measure of the Constitutional Court, and yet we didn't do what was supposed to be done. And yet you can also live in a society which even doesn't have the Constitution, such as United Kingdom, for example. So we come to the point of adopting laws when we see, and of course, here when it comes to these issues, laws do have to be adopted because it's a new trend. I mean, new trend. It's a trend being developed. It's a wrong word to say it's a new trend. It's a new trend in terms of history of constitutionalism, but it has been, but we also live in a period in times when life has become very, very fast. So we can't measure it by those terms, how long it has been going on, but if you take into account exactly the radical feminist movements, 60s and 70s and onwards, it has been going on and it has been present for a while. And we have to say also, Jelena, that we, thanks to our socialist period of constitutionalism also, we have embraced some values, and in some aspects, women in Serbia, in former Yugoslavia as well, enjoyed some rights and were more equal in some aspects than their, how should I say, compatriots in other countries. Yes. So there were some progressive things which were done in that period, and also we see how we can regress. So nothing is achieved, nothing is achieved forever.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, in the previous constitution, one of Slavia, the marriage of the person, not between men and women.
No. We didn't have such. It was too progressive for that time. But what we had. But for example, we had in 1974 constitutional right to abortion, which was recognized, whereas it has only been now introduced in the French constitution. It has been introduced in the French constitution, which is also interesting in the context of the backsliding of these values in other great democracies of the Western Hemisphere, such as United States, which where the Supreme Court overrode Roe versus overrode Roe versus Wade, which concerned the right of women to have abortion and to have support of public, exactly what we were talking about, to have a public assistance, because this is what the whole point about abortion is, that without public assistance you can't actually perform it. So without welfare state, without medical health and this kind of support, you cannot actually enjoy it. So the things can go, the progress and regress is possible everywhere. Thank you all for these comments. This shows that how complex it is. But I think that the most important thing to remember is that we are interested when it comes to human rights or fundamental rights, and in general when it comes to constitutionalism, we are interested in how it is finally applied. We are interested in the effects, not so much what is stated. Of course, we care about what is stated if we see that things are not going well in practice. But things can be perfectly, can perfectly develop in practice, and in that case, we don't even think about whether the legislation is good or bad if we see that these values are actually respected. And vice versa, the mere fact that we have the piece of legislation is not something that we should be sufficiently content with. We should still go further with, with all the post-legislative and with full understanding that what we are interested in is the application itself, whether it is applied.
Piece of legislation.
Yes. Yeah, this is it. Yes, of course, it is important to have a well-drafted gender equality legislation. Of course, you need to have in our society, which is very patriarchal, you need to put it in the constitution, or we didn't have to. It doesn't matter. Okay, it matters, but at this stage, we could have said, okay, the constitution says that the marriage is a union of men and women, but at the same time, we could have recognized some other kind of partnerships for those who, for gay and lesbians.
But when it was a topic, when they were drafting the law for the civic registration of partnership, the issue and the obstacle was also it's not constitutional, even though it didn't use the word marriage.
Yes.
It was civic registration. Unconstitutional or marriage. Yeah, the main argument in the public sphere was it, but also for gender sensitive language, people say gender is not a part of things.
Yeah, that's
We're learning words have their gender and their not. Every time
the argument is, of course, completely false, and it's all a matter of interpretation. Yeah, you can find ways to interpret it, or at the end of the day, if you really don't think you can find the ways to interpret it, then you amend the constitution. It's also possible to do it, and some countries resorted to that measure as well. Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm not saying it's it's easy, but I'm just saying that if there is a will, there is a way. There's a good will, there is a way, and this is what is actually quite lacking. And this is why the gender equality legislation was important, because it insisted on the cultural interiorization, on development of through the programs, through the studying programs, through the use of appropriate language in media, through different programs in media, through the use of appropriate gender-sensitive language in public communication and through the administration. The legislation, the law itself, insisted on these mechanisms rightly, very much rightly, and not accidentally. It was based on different sources coming from the Council of Europe, not just the Istanbul Convention, but also other resolutions of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, resolutions which insisted on the importance of interiorization of these values. That adopting just that this is what it is about. Adopting just a piece of legislation that's so easy, and it doesn't mean anything if you don't really work on its implementation. Yeah. Yeah, sure. No, it's fine. I think.
And also amendments, constitutional amendments regarding judicial.
Yeah.
So possible. But that's what it's never changed.
Uncle, how are you?
There was the political will. Yeah, exactly.
And we see also that when it comes to gay parades, there are periods when it can go very smoothly without any problems, and at the same time there are periods when it is obstructed by all sorts of unimaginable arguments. So it is a matter of political will, and there has to be that kind of commitment. Yeah, but why there is no political will? It's that also shows how important other elements of the system are. As we said, while defining the concept of politics, the politics presupposes a pluralism within a community. When there is one single topic, a society in which there is one single topic, and our colleague who unfortunately died very early, Olga Popovic-Obradovic, she had a title she entitled one of her articles Kolika ili kakva Serbia. So that is, I think, this title in itself, kolika ili kakva država. This is what how she formulated, meaning thinking about Serbia. The question, she put rightly this long time dilemma which is obsessing us, whether we should be worried as to how big our state is, or what kind of state we live in. And since since we are predominantly obsessed with this topic, how big our state is, and it becomes, or for certain periods of times, it was a single topic, it then puts into the shade all other topics.
But besides also whether civic conception or ethno cultural conception, that was also her point.
Yeah. Kakva ili kolika država, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, because if you come to the question of kakva država, this is exactly what politics is about proposing different policies. There are other issues in life, except for that one, how big our state is. There are other relevant issues. And then you also come to the question, kakva država, whether it should be ethnic or civic. And within those concepts,
which kind of principle
of citizenship, yes. On what the citizenship should be based, yes. Okay. So it's good to have discussion, yes. And I will speed up. Well, I think we can learn. This is interactiveness. It's important. It is a way also to learn. And these topics we will also further develop in the context of. I have 2 more slides, so it's all going to be within the envisaged time limits. So these are the questions which we are going to anyway develop in the context of, for sure, human rights agenda perspective. And maybe if any one of you opts for public law aspects of gender equality, we will also be dealing with these issues there, but also from another perspective in the context of feminist judgments. So nothing is going to be missed. It's good to have the discussion. There are different, when we speak of constitutionalism now, if we go into the substance, not into the evolution of the concept, that's what the concept implies. Here I take the categories from Susan Bayer, who is a great constitutionalist woman, former professor at the Humboldt University and former justice of the German Federal Constitutional Court. One of those who drafted the judgment on the intersex as a third sex. So I take the concepts from her. She insists on the fact that constitutionalism has a couple of its arenas, or you could call them dimensions. One of them is fundamental rights. This is something that constitutionalism is in the Western world primarily associated with, whereas in our world, constitutionalism is more associated with the government and how the government is organized, which is definitely a topic for constitutional law and also an arena for constitutionalism. And here we will just briefly take a look at these subcategories. So I will just not comment too much these concepts. One of those key issues is actually who is the legal subject. Who is the legal subject? Because we saw that kind of evolution, transition from men to women, not from men to women, but to include women, and also that that there is no essentialism, from essentialism to intersectional diversity. That actually this legal subject can be intersex, that legal subjects are also transgender people, that legal subjects are also gays and lesbians, that the subjects are also bisexuals. So instead of looking at the things in that essentialist way, we should rather understand that there are different nuances and that they should be, of course, the other term more popular nowadays is woke. And this whole, Europe is still on one side in that sense when it comes to these values, meaning Western Europe, as compared to the United States. And it has quite advanced in recognizing the legal subjectivity as compared to the United States, for example, or not comparing to the United States, but more comparing to the to the kind of narrative which Trump is developing right now, and Elon Musk and everyone around them. Yeah, that it can take roots there as well. I mean, the whole campaign was based on that. To Kamala Harris, when he says, "She speaks of them, and I speak to you." Them, linguistically, which you use nowadays, exactly because we want to avoid defining subjects.
Instead of
Yes, include exactly. Them would be very inclusionary. Yes. Yeah.
What's also interesting that we look at the US as a woke country,
Yes.
but they never had female president. So
Yes, it's true. But things change, Hillary Clinton won more votes than Donald Trump in 2016, to be frank. Yes. More so-called popular votes. He had more electoral votes. But it's also because the system is biased, as I said. It's biased, and this is exactly the best example of bias in the American electoral system.
Everything.
I mean, it was not about women and men, because also, of course, men voted for Hillary too, and women voted for Donald Trump. But it just shows how it can be biased. Yes.
Like, if she was a man.
Yeah. Yeah. But Hillary still won more votes, is what I'm telling you. I'm not sure if Kamala entered too late in the campaign. It's another topic. And he was, of course, he was very playing dirty in the campaign, Donald Trump. That's another issue. So the other things that we will be talking about from different perspectives throughout the courses that you have is the agency and participation. So the suffragette movement, the movement for the recognition of political rights of women was very much important, because through that participation, we expect to achieve the agenda, different agendas, different policies to be more inclusive. Without that participation, without that recognition of political rights, this is why they have a particular status. And this is why some authors consider that political rights are, let's say, more important than the other rights, because it is thanks to political rights that we define the other rights. If you don't have political rights, you can't have other rights. So this is one of those angles. From pyramid to triangle, meaning that contrary to the previous understanding of liberty put at the first place as in the Western constitutionalism, or as we call it, indubitus pro libertatem, and whenever we have doubts, we should give advantage to liberty. The new constitutionalism insists on the values of dignity and equality, which is not just formal, but which is substantive. We will be talking, as I said, throughout the course, other courses, through concrete examples, and also we will see how complicated it can be. It's not always it's not always easy to decide, because there are different interplaying and also conflicting values, and all values being equal.
That's why the conventional approach is
helping
productive, how to say,
as a tool, as a concept,
for discussing what to be prior or
and I will. We don't have time, because each of these topic is a. But as I said, we will be talking about them: the political dimension, democracy, the legal dimension, rule of law. As you just mentioned, the constitutional court. I mean, it is presupposed. It is part of the concept of rule of law, not just to have a state which is subjected to the law, the rule of law, and not rule of man, as it comes already from the Aristotelian and Plato's philosophy. but it is also to have proper agencies, such as constitutional courts, to implement it. And yet the things can go exactly bad with constitutional courts. I get my throat gets dry and so I have to drink all the time. And the welfare state as well. You know, if you don't have public education, how can you enjoy in democracy? Or how can you enjoy rule of law when legal services are so expensive? If you also don't have some kind of minimum of education to save yourselves from going to the courts, for example, by engaging or by trying other venues of solving your problems. And also material dimension, which is sustainability and environment in the context of ethical care, but also taking into account how maybe climate changes maybe potentially differently affect men and women. Taking into account that in many, not speaking of the highly industrialized societies, but more looking at those societies which are at the first or second stage of economic development, whereas Serbia is maybe the third stage. So in those countries, again, the privileges which are also patriarchal, the privilege of studying, of schooling, is mainly given to the boys, whereas women, they stay in the villages and they're still in the fields. And in that sense, the sustainability issues, environmental issues, may affect differently women and men. Okay, so I will stop here because of the time, and also unless, of course, you have questions or comments. Okay, and maybe
dear professor,
yes.
Continue 2 or 5 minutes if required, because I think you need to say something more about material dimension, sustainability, and the environment. We need to. It is new to us. We need to know more about this.
Okay, I will then. We will. Thank you. Thank you. I will then deal with it more in the context of human rights. We will, in that context of the human rights, we will be speaking more about. I will dedicate some time to the environmental issues and right to health environment as well, in the context of a more now holistic, in a different way, approach to constitutionalism, which, as I said, includes gender equality in itself, which is gender balance. Okay.
So could you sum up how?
Yeah. Yes. Could you? I had the impression you were saying something.
Yeah. Yes, Professor.
Yes.
Lakunoch.
Lakunoch.
I wanted to ask you to sum up how the concept of constitution and conception of constitutionalism, due to your understanding and to their understanding, do contribute to this change from the feminist perspective conception of the political.
Well, I will be speaking of from another looking at your question from another perspective. When I speak of human rights, for example, in that context of that course, and I try to introduce a new concept of fundamental rights, it's very challenging, to speak of. I can speak nowadays of fundamental rights, but then when I speak of the 19th century, 20th century, it wasn't so much developed as a concept. It was more developed as a concept of human rights. And then before that, it was developed as a concept of rights of man. So it's a bit trying to be speaking, and then the sources are natural law. So it's a kind of trafficking of the concept of constitutionalism, if I can use that kind of term, or kidnapping of that kind of term, because it is, or you can say that this is that the concept is evolving with the time, with the new values, and as a society also, and our level of self-awareness and awareness of the others is evolving. Because initially constitutionalism was not anything about gender balance. But with time, and this is why I speak of different stages, it became more informed or invested with this value of gender balance. So initially, this is why also many authors look very critically at the concept of prohibition of discrimination. Because the prohibition of discrimination as a concept is based on formal understanding. And then we had to introduce those that you, I think, at least you mentioned them in the presentations, the concept, and that, of course, I will talk more in the follow-up of the courses. We introduced the concepts of affirmative action, or the concept of positive discrimination, and we introduced the concepts of group rights, which is another important tool for understanding the developments, because also we consider that affirmative action should be present as long as there are inequalities. Whereas the idea of group rights presupposes that they should stay there forever, group rights. And not just that we should be considering the issue of the state of the development of those inequalities in practices. So constitutionalism, to me, it seems natural to speak of these different stages of constitutionalism. And in that sense, we should bear in our minds that it had in each of those stages actually different meaning. That I wouldn't say that constitutionalism is helping us. I would say that we are changing this is why I said we are kidnapping, we are trafficking it. We are actually changing the meaning of the constitutionalism. Rather than the concept itself helping us in anything.
Expanding the quality of the meaning.
Yes. It's giving it another meaning, investing it in
another quality.
Yeah, another quality.
More inclusive.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then also see you as of January. Yes, it's gonna be, I think, 16, 17, 18. As of 19th, I think we're gonna start having.
I don't know. 19th.
No, even before that. No. As of 12th. Yeah, 12th.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be feminist judgment of human rights. You're welcome. Evo, ja ću slučiti ovdje. Thank you also for you who were online, and looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor,
Thank you, Professor, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
I ruže sam dobila i ovog mog prijatelja, uživala sam. Daleko je bilo, ja mislim stvarno da je bilo.
Znači sve je bilo, da kažem, znači sve je bilo snimljeno, 2 sata i nešto je da. Hvala vama. Prijetno iđenje.
Videli ništa ne treba.